Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, we're going to talk about animations, some things to know about animations and how to make them. So, it's really important to understand how animations work in RPG in a Box so that you don't get stuck working with the animations. So, think about animations as a flick book, okay? They're all one connected timeline, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of animations for this chest. We're going to make one when it's open. We're going to make one for when it's closed. And then we'll also make a break animation. So if you decide to break the chest, then there can be a series of frames that animate the chest being broken. Okay. So we're going to use these buttons along the bottom to achieve this task. At the moment, we've only got one frame in this object, which is just the chest, okay? Just the chest as you see it right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button here that's going to duplicate the current frame. So now we've got two frames in our object, and they're identical. So if we go back and forth between them, you can see there's no difference, okay? But we want the frame 2 to be the frame where the chest is open, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Select tool, and I'm going to select the whole top of the chest. So I'm going to use the Shift key to select the ones that didn't get selected initially, to add them to the selection. I'm just going to rotate around the model, make sure I've just got all of the top of the chest. And then I'm going to click the Rotate button, get the right axis, of course. So let's rotate it back. Right, so now we've got it rotated in the right direction. It takes a bit of just making sure which angle it should be when you rotate. I've now made it so that this top section of the chest is now rotated up. What we can do as well is we can go to the Delete tool and just delete this inner layer there so you can see into the lid. We'll also delete the section there so it looks like the chest is hollow and you've got an inside to it. Let's just do face mode and delete like that. Okay. And then if you wanted to, you could color the inside black using the color tool. So then there's mysterious what's inside the chest, I think. Let's also add a bit of height to it like that. Okay. So there's our open chest. Okay. Now we need to think about the animation for when the chest breaks. So let's go back to frame 1 and let's duplicate it again. So I'm going to click the Duplicate Current Frame button. Now it's going to put that at frame 2. So we've got two frames at the beginning where they look identical, but that's not what I want because frame 2 is supposed to be the open one. So I'm going to go back to frame 2, which is a copy of frame 1 at the moment. And I'm going to click this button here where it's going to move it along the timeline. So I want to move it from frame 2 to frame 3. So now it's at the end. The copy we just made is now at the very end rather than being in the middle. So as we go through the time, you can see frame 1 is the shut chest, frame 2 is the open chest, and frame 3 is the shut chest again. Now, why do we have a copy of the shut chest again at the end of the timeline? Because this is going to be the start of our break animation. So I'm going to copy this frame again, and that's going to create a frame 4, which is fine because it's always going to do it at the end now because we were at the last frame when we copied it. And let's start deleting just some random voxels. So make sure we're in Vox mode. Let's just click and drag and just copy the frame. Doesn't have to be neat. I'm just creating an example animation. So I'm just going to randomly break this chest over the course of a few frames. Let's just keep going. Let's now delete that. One more, couple more frames. So this one will delete all of the top. And then one more frame. And we'll just delete all of that and all of that. And let's say this is the final look at our demolished box, the chest, right? So if we go back through from frame 9 to frame 4, you can see this is our animation for the chest breaking. Oh, sorry, 3 to 9, okay? So it's important to note that we've done all of this in one timeline, in one, all of these frames, every animation is on the same set of frames. So it's like a flick book. When you flick through an animation book, it's the same book. It's just every page has a different thing happening. So think of these frames as pages of the same book. And the book in this case is the object, in this case the treasure chest. So you can't have a separate set of animations that are different to the timeline that you've got set up here. The numbers have to go from 1 to however many frames you're going to have throughout your entire object, okay? So if we were to have another animation where, I don't know, this chest floats or something, let's say an idle animation, then they would also have to be a different set of numbers, 10 to 12 or something like that. Let's say we did that. Let's say we went to frame 3 and we copied it. We would then have to move the copy to frame 10 because we don't want it to interfere with our destruction animation. And then we want this chest to float by default. So what you would do is you'd have frame 10 where it looks like this. You'd then copy the frame one more time, select everything, move it up slightly. Then copy the frame again to frame 12, select everything, move it up slightly, deselect everything, copy the frame again to frame 13, select everything, move it down, and then select everything, copy the frame again to frame 14, select everything, and move it down. Okay, so now we've got a whole series of frames that are doing a lot of different things, right? We've got 14 frames in our model, and we can go through all of them and see what they will show, right? Now, once you've done that, you need to tell the game which series of frames make up which animation, okay? So now we've sort of animated our box entirely. We now need to think about which frames are for which animation, okay? So that's where this bit comes in, the animations section. So we're going to create an animation, and we're going to call this close. Let's call it closed, okay? And it's just frame 1 to frame 1. Okay, and we'll make it a clamp. So clamp means it's just going to stay at the last frame. Okay, so that's our closed animation. Okay, it's just frame 1 because that's what it should look like. Frame 2 is going to be when it's open. So we'll go and create a new animation. We'll call it open. And this is frame 2 to frame 2, because that's the only frame that's to do with the open stuff. And again, clamp, so that when it gets to the end frame, it stops. Okay. Then we need an animation for when the chest breaks. Now we can just remind ourselves that that's frame 3 all the way through to, I think it's 9. And then 10 goes back to a full chest again. So that's 3 to 9. So create a new animation. We'll call it break. Frame 3 to 9. Again, clamp, because when it reaches frame 9, we want it to stay on that frame. Click OK. And then that's that. And then idle is going to be frames 10 to 14. Okay, so we'll name this idle. Now, idle is a built-in name, so we can actually click the magnifier glass and choose one of the pre-built names. In this case, it's not idle, default for an object. So we'll click default, and we're going to make this frame 10 to 14, and this is going to be a loop. So it's going to just play it over and over and over again. Okay? So now we can preview our animations. So we can say, let's have a look at break. And if you click the play button, that's now the break animation. Let's preview the closed animation. Well, it's just going to show frame 1, right? Because it's just a state. You obviously could animate the lid opening and closing, but that's, up to you to do. Open, let's preview it. The chest opens, right? Close, let's preview it. The chest should close. Well, so that's the states, open and closed. Let's take a look at the idle animation, the default animation. It should float and do that on a loop. Okay, so that's how the animator works in RPG in a Box. Every frame of animation is on the same shared timeline. So there is no way to have an open animation that's got separate frames from the closed animation. It's just that they share the same flick book. It's just that the animation names are like the chapters of that book, and you're defining which pages make up that chapter. So in this case, the default looping animation is frames 10 to 14 over and over and over again. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense about how to use the animator in RPG in a Box and how to animate your models properly. Okay?